Spoilers ahead. Watch out, and take care. The movie begins with a dramatic scenario, focusing on Basil, a legendary robber with a bold plot. He sets his sight on the wealthy banker's vaults in the city, daring to steal the next day, with his criminal partner, Judas Jack. Detective Frank Baskin arrives on the site to investigate the heist, as the bankers report it. Basil stole a treasure trove of priceless goods, including one of the city's most expensive watches. But he isn't one to sit on his loot. With the assistance of hired fencers, Danny Jones quickly exchanges his stolen goods for hard cash. Basil walks away a free man, reveling in the lavish fruits of his audacious crime, as the transaction proceeds smoothly. Basil's sudden prosperity, however, is fleeting. Within 3 weeks, his criminal associate Jack makes a terrible error, selling his loot to the wrong individuals, and they all are quickly imprisoned. Despite the brutal realities of their circumstances, Basil and Jack accept their fate, realizing the inherent risks involved with their line of business. Basil shares a cell with Zoltan, a member of the Hungarian mafia. They become acquainted and close. One day, Zoltan contacts his boss, and requests someone seek out someone who can break in. Basil is given the authority to carry out this lucrative task. After being released from prison 3 years later, Basil goes to Zoltan's boss, Erzsébet Landos. She is a well-known head of the Hungarian mafia. There, Basil discovers Erzsébet intends to break into a safe in the heart of Hatton Garden, a London jewellery store. He is initially hesitant, because the establishment is outfitted with strict security, and access to the safe deposit box requires an access code. Alarms and CCTV cameras are also installed in various areas. But it appears that Erzsébet has already prepared everything. Basil only needs to find a way into the safe. Of course, Basil cannot complete this mission on his own. So he meets a crook named Danny Jones. Basil describes the strategy for breaking into Hatton Garden. But he requires the services of several experts. Danny, who has been involved in the world of stealing for a long time, naturally has a large network of contacts. He does, however, request some time to collect his friends. Later, a man is seen in a stadium, Detective Frank Baskin, a former police officer, who earlier succeeded in capturing Basil. He meets Mark Ford, one of the most powerful people in town. Mark learns the Hungarian mafia directed Basil to break into Hatton Garden safe, and he wants Frank to assist him in removing one box from the safe at Hatton Garden. Danny and his friend Brian meet with Basil the next day. Brian, who does not know Basil, assures the mission's backdrop. Basil explains the scheme to break into the safe. Brian affirms everything has to be done correctly. He does not want anything unpleasant to happen. If they make a mistake, they will have to deal with the mafia. Basil eventually agrees, and intends to bring 2 friends after that. One of them will be a craftsman transporter, and the other will be both a driver and an informant. Kenny is the driver, while the craftsman transport is Terry. They are old, but they have robbery expertise and experience. Frank, on the other hand, is attempting to get information, questioning Basil's former colleague, Judas Jack. Jack had learned from a few Hungarian mafia guys that Basil would recruit a group of elderly criminals to steal Hatton Garden. Although Jack is confident they will not be able to enter Hatton Garden, due to the building's rigorous security and the criminals' age. However, Frank insists on Jack reporting if he hears any fresh information. Next, the squad gathers, including Kenny and Terry. Brian informs them they will be joining the heist expedition in Hatton Garden. When Kenny and Terry learn that their destination is Hatton Garden, they are skeptical that they will make it safely. But Brian persuades them, claiming Basil is well versed in all aspects of the security system. Furthermore, Danny states if their reward this time is anticipated to be more than 100 million, the significant risk is unquestionably worth it. They all agree after they convene, and the plot begins. Terry follows the movements of the guards at Hatton Garden every day. Danny, on duty, purchases one piece of equipment at a time from the market, so that the transaction can't be traced later. While Kenny is on duty, he must remain with the vehicle that will transport the stolen treasure. Brian, on duty as a down planner, pretends to want to retain his diamonds in the building. Brian can see the position of the safe, and the security system utilized in the buildings while disguised. Brian and Basil evaluate the plan, and intend to build a hole to enter it when everything is observed. Finally, Brian decides they will do the mission on Easter, because it also falls during the weekend. Basil passes over the plans he has created to Erzsébet. The mafia boss provides necessary information, such as a security code and an alarm code. She requests a portion of a 14 million diamond. Moreover, if the mission fails, Basil will become the stakes. At night, on his way home, Basil is unexpectedly stopped by Frank and compelled to accompany him. Frank warns Basil not to deal with the Hungarian mafia. Basil realizes he is already aware of the robbery scheme, and is concerned that the scheme will fail. Frank says he will not disrupt the scheme, but he does request a cut of the robbery. The next day, Basil is visited by Elizabeth, who states she dislikes it when Frank comes to her on her assignment. It appears she is aware of the occurrence. Basil and Frank, she believes, are pals. He defends himself saying the truth. Frank is an ex-police officer who imprisoned him. She is still disappointed, and wants him to return the stolen gems by Easter. The day of execution arrives after a long period of anticipation. Basil begins dressing in business attire. He goes to cover the cameras at Hatton Garden. Then he waits for his friends to approach the automobile, and receives a text from Frank requesting that he grab box number 175. They all cautiously enter through the entrance, and destroy all of the cameras. Then Basil enters the security room to deactivate the alarm system, and enter the code Elizabeth has given him. Terry and Danny enter after successfully shutting it down, carrying some garbage bags containing some equipment. Meanwhile, Kenny stands outside, inspecting the situation. Danny and Basil take the elevator downstairs first. They swiftly cut the bars that were obstructing the safe. And now there is only one door between them, and the room containing all of the valuable jewels. To open the massive safe, they use a big drill that has been positioned so they take turns holding the drill slowly. Half of the wall remains indestructible after an hour. Later, Terry needs to use the restroom, and Basil goes with him. However, while waiting for Terry, Basil notices something strange, and immediately informs Frank. The alarm has been deactivated, but it continues to produce a signal. Basil requests that Frank check to see if they have been apprehended or not. Unfortunately, Frank is unable to assist, because the alarm is not linked to the police, but to a private security company. Basil, scared, tries to abandon the mission, but Frank insists on continuing, because he needs the package. If Basil refuses, he threatens to call his colleagues. Terry overhears the discussion, and believes Basil told the cops about their robbery. Basil finally states that he is calling a former police officer, because an alarm has unexpectedly activated, and he doesn't want to ruin the plan. He also states that everything is still secure, because he has promised a safe box to his police colleague. Brian eventually returns to resume drilling. The formidable barricade is ultimately breached after nearly 3 hours. But there is one more thing they need to do: push the vault that is blocking the hole they have created. Because it is hammered into the concrete at the top and bottom, the cabinet has to be hydraulically pushed. Brian faints due to exhaustion, while preparing the hydraulic equipment. The wire appears to be broken as well. Basil has no choice but to abort the mission, and quickly calls Kenny to pick them up at the side door. When they arrive at the car, Kenny inquires what has occurred. Basil simply instructs Kenny to drive the car and get out of there. He has no control over the situation. He recognizes that the mafia will complicate his business. Frank requests the box, and threatens that if it is not delivered within 24 hours, all his buddies will be reported. Basil is under some stress at the moment. Sadly, he is unable to change the situation. The appearance of Danny, Terry and Kenny in the afternoon takes Basil by surprise. They arrive to inform that Brian's condition has deteriorated, and that he will be unable to complete the mission. Basil is pessimistic, since he assumes the cops are already aware of their acts. Kenny, on the other hand, maintains that he passed by Hatton Garden this afternoon, and no one was there. In other words, no one is aware of their actions. Danny has also purchased a hydraulic cable to replace the broken one. They eventually return to Hatton Garden to finish the mission. When they arrive, they promptly replace the hydraulic cable. The hydraulics quickly began to shove the only vault in the way. They enter the safe area, one by one. And now there are dozens of storage boxes, filled with diamonds and other treasures, right in front of them. They each do their thing. Basil is responsible for opening all of the boxes with the tools he has. Meanwhile, Danny and Terry unload and divide all of their valuables. Basil doesn't forget what Frank has ordered, which is box number 175, which he instantly takes. He ultimately says farewell to Frank and Elizabeth's order, successfully retrieving the box. This is the last time Danny and Terry see Basil. When he arrives at an alley, he immediately calls Jack, and asks to be picked up and driven away from this neighborhood. When Basil arrives at his location, he offers a very valuable diamond, as a token of gratitude. Frank appears at the bottom, pointing a gun, while he counts his portion. He requests not just his order box, but also extras, because he is quite interested in seeing the loot at the moment. Basil is ready to hand Frank a bag full, when Elizabeth appears and forces Frank to back down. Basil complains about Frank's threats to report his group, if his order is not delivered on time. Fortunately, Elizabeth's strength outweighs Frank's, and she saves him. After getting what she wanted, Elizabeth leaves. Basil has a gun, and points it at Frank, who pledges not to report him and his gang's acts. The box Frank has brought is promptly handed over to Mark, and there has been no information on the contents of the package until today. Meanwhile, Basil flees London, and freely enjoys his fortune, while Terry, Danny, Brian and Kenny all have a good time with their haul. But sadly, it does not last long, because the police discover who broke into the Hatton Garden safe, 6 weeks later. All because of Kenny's irresponsibility in using his private car to inspect the area before they committed the theft. The suspects are arrested one by one, and sentenced to 6 years in prison. Jack is also arrested, after he is discovered receiving his share of the stolen gems. Meanwhile, Basil escapes capture, since no one knows his real name. As a result, when interrogated, no one is able to provide his data. The end. Thank you for watching. Subscribe if you'd like to see more videos like this. Turn on the notifications, and leave a like to help the channel out.